This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello, and a warm welcome to Mr. Soumya Datta, part of
Namaskar.
SAPACC, International Community, United Nations, or whatever you say, climate crisis, wherever happens, the climate changes or environmental impacts. Mr. Soumya Datta is there and is about to fly, and is flying to Morocco to educate the Islamic countries on the need for understanding climate change. So, the topic of the day: what has happened in Turkey and Syria? Was there any forewarning before? Still, we did not heed. Loss of lives, loss of properties, absolute devastation in Turkey and Syria. Is that going to affect the other parts of the world wherein the forewarnings are what they should not be doing in such sensitive areas if they have done? Our India's latest Joshimath, and like that the northeastern region or any other region is in India also is sensitive, is prone to such earthquake devastation, I call. Because is earthquake going to kill you? The tremors of the earth, what is it? Is it really the earthquake or the bad aspects which one indulges in building or in the name of life, development, or welfare? Is that the reason this thing has resulted in killing so many innocent people as well as making them to lose their properties, hard earned money, properties? Now they have become desolate on the roads now, literally. The Mediterranean Sea, what has happened there? Let us listen to our guest. Sir, Soumya Dattaji, please.
Thank you and Namaskar and Adab and uh, good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Let us first start with paying our respect to all the people who have died and
Yes.
expressing our deep sympathy with the people of Turkey and Syria in this hour of grief and tragedy. This is one of the biggest tragedies out of a disaster. And a lot of people are talking about this as a natural disaster. Yes, on the face of it, this is a natural disaster because the earthquakes, we don't have a role in either creating or preventing or increasing or decreasing the intensity of earthquakes. That is beyond us. But as many of us know, and you can see in the screen the kind of devastation. This is a northern
Shall I show you?
Syria before and after picture.
Shall I
So
shall I make it? Yeah.
can we
DRTSPR.
come to the
Yes, yes. DRTSPR channel pays heartful homage to all those precious lives who have been lost, and our heartfelt condolences to all those bereaved families and the countries Syria and Turkey. Yes, sir.
sure. So we are seeing this devastation, and this is not the first one. Can we go into the next when the buildings, when there is a when buildings kill the visuals?
Is
Yes,
this
uh, actually we know for quite a long time that this is an even experts are quite unanimous in saying that earthquakes don't kill people, it's bad buildings which do. If you look at how people have died by the tens of thousands, in fact, the total death toll in Turkey and Syria for this earthquake is coming to roughly 40,000 and maybe even more, which are unaccounted. But what has killed them? It's not because of the earthquake itself. It's because buildings have collapsed in very large numbers. And this was a very big earthquake, no doubt about it. 7.8 and 7.6 magnitudes are very big earthquakes. So the buildings have fallen down and trapped people and killed people. So basically, what we are seeing is a result, this disaster, as a result of bad buildings in places where this kind of building should not have been built in the first place. So, this is, though we are calling it a natural disaster, the human stupidity, human folly, often the human greed is actually driving this kind of disasters. We also know that this area, can we go into the geological features of this area, the geologic fault lines and plate boundaries? If we look back into history also, we'll see that big earthquakes in these regions are not rare. Let's go into the geologic character of this region, the fault lines and the maps, Dr. Reddy.
Yeah, yeah.
So this
Let,
region of Anatolia, no, these are Delhi area. In the
oh,
we'll go
starting it.
to the first ones, starting ones,
Yeah.
not these
Are
ones.
these,
Huh.
are these the
So
ones?
this is the this you can increase. This is the present site. This is the present site of the present earthquake. These you can see. Then on the north of this area is the Black Sea. On the south and southwest is the Mediterranean Sea, and this is the one of the areas near Turkey-Syria border, Gaziantep, where the second earthquake struck, or the first earthquake struck, the 7.8. So these areas will go into the maps of the fault lines and the plates now. These are areas where the earthquake is striking, and I'll show you why this is nothing unusual. Can we go into the plate boundary maps
Yeah.
so that I can explain? The plate boundary maps.
Yeah, yes,
This
yes.
is
I'm present.
historical.
Is this the one?
How this can be shown? Can we explain this? Then we'll go similar maps. There you can see the Turkey-Syria area. This is a history called the Anatolia. On the south of it, it's the African plate, which is pushing the Anatolian plate, and the African plate is actually subducting, that is going under the Anatolian plate and pushing it and raising it. Similarly, on the right hand side, that is from the east, it is the Arabian plate. This red zone you can see, the Arabian plate, which is pushing the Anatolian plate. The Anatolian plate from the north, the Eurasian plate is pressing it. So it is called that the Anatolian plate, this region, is the most actively deformed, geologically deformed area in the world. That means four plates are pressing against each other in this area. The Anatolian plate, where Turkey and Syria sits, the northern Syria, Turkey, these are on the Anatolian plate. These plates are tectonic plates. So this area on the from the south, the Cyprian and Aegean plate arc from the African plate. There is a massive pressure and massive offlet. From the eastern side, the Arabian plate is pushing. From the northern side, the Eurasian plate is pushing. So this area you can see the red boundary line. That is called the East Anatolian fault line. We can go into another map, the colorful maps
Yeah.
of the plates, so that we can be even more clear. Not these ones. These are earthquake zones. The plate boundary maps.
Is this the one?
No, no, no. Plate boundary maps. Maps.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
We can
I'm
show
going
the
to.
maps. No, this is Delhi area. We can go to plate boundary maps of Anatolia and East African plate. Yes. So here you can see the Anatolian plate is at the center. The Eurasian plate is pushing. The Anatolian plate and the Aegean Sea plate, that means the Cyprus, Aegean Sea, this plate is pushing. This is a fragmented plate. The African plate is pushing from south, from down, and subducting under the Anatolian plate. And from the east, that means on the right hand side of the picture, the Arabian plate is pushing. Where the Arabian plate is pushing and the African plate from the south, from down, is pushing, this whole area is called East Anatolian fault line, and the upper part where the Eurasian plate is pushing and the top boundary, these are called the North Anatolian fault lines. Historically, these areas have been subjected to massive scale earthquakes, not once, not twice, not thrice, hundreds of times. And we know from history that one of the biggest earthquake in this region is the Antakya earthquake of 115 CE, that is 1900 years ago. The entire the late Roman civilization in this area was destroyed because the Antakya earthquake, which was only 7.5 in scale, not 7.8 like the present one, happened. And at that point, even at a very low population, 260,000 people roughly were killed. So this area has seen massive scale earthquakes every few hundred years, comparatively smaller but still big earthquakes every few decades. So these areas of Anatolian plate boundaries, we know that these are very earthquake prone zones. So one thing is, if we have to build here, first thing is we should not be building big cities on this fault line. And as we have seen, if we can go back to this present earthquake location again, I'll show you that these present cities that have been hit are sitting on this East Anatolian fault line. So
You want me to show
can
you
you just,
that one, the earlier one which we have shown?
the one earlier one where the present earthquake zone was visible. Then we'll come back to this other maps also. There are several maps that I have sent. Yes, if
Yes.
you can increase this, you see the same Gaziantep. So this is sitting on the, you can see Syria on the right hand side, lower right hand side, and Anatolia on the left, that is Turkey. Turkey is the present name. That whole area is called Anatolia. So we can see that the present earthquake struck exactly at the cities which are sitting on the East Anatolia. So we know very well that this area will be hit by massive earthquakes. It's nothing unknown. Science knows it. Historically, there are records of dozens of big earthquakes. Can we go back to the maps again?
Yeah.
And you can keep showing one map after another every 2-3 minutes so that
Yes,
people
yes.
can see. Yes, this is important area. See, this is a present Turkey and Syria. And as I said, if you look at the earthquake that struck and many of the aftershocks, by some estimate 600 aftershocks, somebody said 258 aftershocks. Aftershocks are earthquakes themselves, which are lower in magnitude from the first earthquake. So the first earthquake that struck was 7.8. The second big one was 7.6. And here I must explain the scale of Richter scale of earthquake, which is a logarithmic scale. When people say an earthquake struck of 6 and an earthquake struck of 7, people think it's a little bit of increase. But since it's a logarithmic scale, a 7 magnitude earthquake is 10 times as powerful as a 6 magnitude earthquake. So when we have a 6.1 or 6.2 magnitude earthquake in the Indian Himalayas, it's a big earthquake. Anything 6 and above is a big earthquake. So by that standard of logarithmic scale, a 7 magnitude is 10 times as powerful. It releases at least 10 times as much energy as a 6 magnitude. And 7.8 is almost 8 times as powerful as a 7 magnitude earthquake. So this was a massive earthquake, and you can see in this map this huge number of earthquake shocks, which is often called an earthquake storm. So this earthquake storm is actually happening, not starting today, not starting with the recent. These earthquake storms in this region have been happening again and again and again. So this region we know, as I said, scientists call this as the most geologically deformed region of the world. So we know that this area will be hit by big earthquakes, either this decade or next decade or this century or next century. And if we keep building unscientifically, keep building massive multi-story apartments without taking into consideration these factors. And you can see here this 100-mile or 100, go back to that area and then we'll come to this. This is the whole Anatolian boundary areas where earthquakes keep happening. So this red kind of region you can see on the right hand side, it is the East Anatolian fault line. On the top of this map, it is the North Anatolian fault line. And from the left hand side, that is from the west, the Arabian plate and the Aegean plate are pressing. So even there is an earthquake. But there are earthquakes which happen regularly. So this area, again, we are saying that this area, particularly along the lines, and if you look at the areas in northern Syria and Turkey, which have been devastated. All of these areas sits on this East Anatolian fault line, which is on the lower right red zone. So I don't know why people, we really fail to understand why people, and not only people, why governments, individual people, individual families, small societies, small communities, you can expect to know all this to regulate. But the governments, which are completely in the know of all this, which have historical records, which have scientific records, they should have taken these kind of things into consideration and never allowed the kind of development, the kind of buildings that came up in Gaziantep and on these areas, in this on right on the East Anatolian fault line. Because as I said, the first big recorded, because even before that, there are records, historical records of more than 3,300 to 3,400 years ago. Can we go into the other one?
Yeah.
That huge earthquakes happened there, and Bronze Age civilizations have collapsed because of earthquake storms. Earthquake storms are not one earthquake, but a series of big earthquakes, big and medium earthquakes, which shake up the entire region. And these earthquake storms have happened in the red zones. You can see in the screen the red zones. These are all regular big earthquake, big and medium earthquake zones. And this is known. What we are repeating. These are known to the government, these are known to the scientific communities. So these are known to the city planners, the builders. None of these are unknown. Can we go into the other maps?
Yeah.
We can keep showing one of the other. Then this region, yes, this you can now clearly see the East Anatolian fault, the North Anatolian fault, the Anatolian plate. You can see the areas that have come under this earthquake sits on the or very near the East Anatolian fault line, which is visible in the map on the middle right hand side, around the middle. On the top little right hand side, the North Anatolian fault line is visible. So these are the areas. Then there is this transform, and where you can see on the bottom the Cyprus arc. That is the place where the African plate from the south is pressing the Anatolian plate. From the east, that is beyond the East Anatolian fault line, the Arabian plate is pressing this Anatolian plate. And as I said earlier too, the Anatolian plate being a small plate, it's being actually being toyed with by the African plate, by the Arabian plate, and by the massive Eurasian plate. Both the African plate and the Eurasian plate on the north, African plate on the south. These are massive plates. The Arabian plate on the east is also a big plate. And then there is the Aegean Cyprian plate on the right, on the left hand side.
Yeah.
So this place is extremely earthquake prone zone, particularly the fault lines and the areas around them. We can show another map and or so these are the, you can see, as I was saying, these lines are there, and even Istanbul is sitting very close to the North Anatolian fault line. Actually, historically, Istanbul faced massive earthquakes earlier, even in this millennia, in this last 1,000 years. That means before 2000, 1000 to 2000, Istanbul faced massive earthquakes. As I said, one of the biggest recorded earthquakes in this region. We don't have very clear records of massive earthquake which happened in 3,300, 3,400 years ago, but some kind of we can show also the historic ruins of those places, many palaces, many massive stone walls which were built with huge stone boulders, processed stone boulders. They have been displaced and dumped. So this area bears records of massive earthquakes throughout history. Whenever we know, and as I said earlier, 115 CE, that is roughly 1900 years ago, the Antakya earthquake, and Antakya is again close to this fault line, almost on the fault line. Earthquake killed 2,60,000 people even in those times. 1900 years ago, not so many people were there, but even then it killed so many people. And it actually happened at a time when the late Roman Empire was prospering there, And it was very well known because in that city, the emperor of the late Roman Empire, Trajan, Emperor Trajan, was actually living there. So he got trapped into the earthquake. So we know some of the records. Today in 2021, 2023, we really have no reason that this kind of tragedy should have happened. You can see here again where this two present earthquake happened. And again and again, I am pointing out these are the cities and the areas that have been devastated were built on the East Anatolian fault line. So should we call it a natural disaster, and should we call it a disaster of human stupidity and human greed? Why should we build this kind of massive structures without making them without making them resistant to massive earthquakes? If we cannot build all structure which are resistant to massive earthquakes, we should build like all of us have seen. Look at Assam and Arunachal, the traditional structure. We all know that our northeast is also earthquake prone zone, zone 4 of Indian earthquake zoning map. Many of our Himalayan states are in zone 4 and zone 5. We'll come to that Indian context later. But since we know these areas are heavily earthquake prone zone, much more earthquake prone zone than even in some of the Himalayan areas. So why these massive buildings and massive city structures were built? This is it again, the tectonic map of Turkey. You can see all the areas, all the red zones, so and different earthquakes that has happened. So every fault line, there are a number of fault lines. It's not only North Anatolian and East Anatolian, but there are a number of fault lines running crisscross across the region, across the boundaries of the plate. So as I'm repeatedly saying, the Turkish government is not a very poor government like say uh, somewhat like Burkina Faso or Malawi, who cannot do anything, who have no money. Turkey lies next to Europe. Turkey is a far more developed country than even India. Turkey's standard of living, Turkey's economic capabilities are far more than even India in terms of per capita situation. So why does a country like Turkey do not take into account that the areas that the cities are coming up are sitting on massive earthquake prone zones? These are sitting on some of the most active geologic fault lines. These are known. So we can go to one diagram where how many big earthquakes above 7, that is massive earthquakes, have happened over the last 120, 23 years. Can we go back to that when there is a, this is the map of the region. We can go back to the linear diagram of earthquakes right from 1900.
Linear.
You showed it earlier.
Oh,
These are the
one.
maps, but the linear diagrams
Oh,
where, just hold on to this minute. This is the, as I showed, you can go back. So this is, we are using visuals from the Wall Street Journal. So this is a clear indication of what happened. As I said, there are two plates which are mixing and which are pushing each other against each other. So every time the pressure builds up, its pressure built up to a certain level. When it cannot hold anymore, it slips. And these are called strike strip fault lines. So as we have shown you the fault lines, this kind of thing happens. One plate slips against another. So the whole earth on top of this, whole soil and rock and everything, mountains, everything, that shakes heavily. And that causes this destruction. Can we go to this others?
is this the one?
No, this is the area of the North Anatolian fault line. This linear diagram, these are this was one which was shown earlier. No, you can go to others. There is a line from
Yeah,
Guardian.
yeah.
These are the aftershocks and the big earthquakes. Go further. No, this is. not this one.
This
This
is
is
India.
Delhi area. No, not this. This is Shimla. Go to this linear. This one. Yes, can you increase this? The other one, earlier one. Can you increase this? Yes.
Yeah.
As you can see, Turkey has been hit by 21 earthquakes which are massive, magnitude 7 and higher since 1900. That is, in the last 123 years, 21 earthquakes of magnitude 7 or more. And every one of 7.5 or more has killed 20,000, 17,000, 40,000 people and destroyed these areas. And all of this, like the 1939 earthquake, killed more than 32,000 people. So you have seen that these areas, what I am repeatedly saying, that it is known clearly that this area, this whole East Anatolian fault line, North Anatolian fault line, this will be hit by earthquakes every 10, 20, 30 years, by big earthquakes, not by earthquakes. Every year there are earthquakes. Every few decades there are massive earthquakes. And I am repeating, in the earthquake, in the Richter scale, it's a logarithmic scale. So in Delhi, somewhere in Kashmir, if there is a 6.2, 6.3, even Delhi gets shaken up. So 6.2 and 7.5 are a difference of 15 to 20 times. So that magnitude earthquake hitting 21 times within a span of 123 years. That means every 5 years or 6 years on the average, a very big earthquake is hitting this area. This is well known, this is documented. So why should a government allow massive structures which will fall to come up in this region? That is a big question. And that's why I'm saying this unfortunate tragedy where tens of thousands of people were killed, lakhs of people lost their homes. This was a massive psychological trauma for millions of people. And now people are living in terror. Even a small earthquake, and as I said, after these two big ones, there are more than 300 aftershocks. And aftershocks are themselves earthquakes. Some of these aftershocks are also magnitude 6. So people are living in terror. And this is a contribution of callous, reckless governance. Because if the government have been responsible, then we should have proper building codes. We should not allow to this kind of buildings to come up in that region. We should have lightweight, integrated structures for buildings. So then, even if earthquakes strike, you will not have huge buildings falling on top of you and people getting killed. Because as I'm repeating this, as experts have repeatedly pointed out, earthquakes don't kill people. It's bad buildings which do, which we have seen in Nepal also. Now, looking at all this, we are now forced to look inward. What about India? What we have,
Yeah.
what have we done in India? Let's see even India's capital, Delhi. Can we go into those Indian things, Indian Delhi's maps, earthquake zone, fault line maps? This is from the, okay, just hold on for a minute here.
Yeah.
This is a map of what happened in the exact same area in Turkey from around mid 20th century. That means from the starting from the massive 1939 earthquake to 1967. Over a period of 30 years, there was which is called an earthquake storm, like a series of big earthquakes, one after the other, one after the other, which actually unzipped the Anatolian fault line, the East Anatolian. This is basically the North Anatolian fault line was unzipped. So this is now moving even more. So we know this 1967, by 1967, geological studies in this area have shown this. These are completely known to scientific communities. This is known to the government of Turkey. So we really fail to understand why no proper, and this is the number of earthquakes, of the massive earthquakes in the same region which happened, which is part of the earthquake storms. Now, can we go into our own country and see what lessons do we have? These are
Yeah.
photographs of ruins of Turkey and Syria from thousands of years ago. So these are very clear that in this area, earthquake damage has taken place for thousands of years. These are historic images. These are not recent. So we have read about this in books, we have seen about this in documentaries, but we failed to act. This is one castle, one big castle which was ruined by earthquake, and this was built by the earlier photographs, and that's why this is an image from National Geographic. It says Crossroads, Anatolia, a history of history made by disasters. So this castle you can see was ruined by earthquakes in the historic times. So this is nothing new that we are facing.
Yeah.
So now
Now
can
we.
we go into India and
Yeah.
end with what we have, what we know, and what we can. Let's start with no, the earlier one, just the earlier one. Right. Can you increase this a bit? We know India, large part of there is a earthquake zoning map of India where zone 5 is the most earthquake prone zone, and zone 4 and zone 5 are the most at risk. We know three of our big cities, Guwahati, Srinagar, and Delhi, are in zone 4. So, Delhi, the capital of India, is in earthquake zone 4. That means fairly high risk of earthquake. And if people recall, in 2021, there were again something like an earthquake storm, something like 21 earthquakes happened that year in Delhi. Not big ones, but one after the other, one after the other, in a span of several months. So these are the possibilities, these are known. And can we go into the map of Delhi region?
Yeah.
The fault line earthquake maps of Delhi region. This is Shimla. We are
Yeah.
showing it because Shimla, also part of Shimla, sits on zone 4 and beyond that zone 5. Yes, this is, can we increase this? Right. Here you can see Delhi. Delhi sits on, and you can see lot of big fault lines and the Himalayan thrust zones. So Himalaya, as we all know, has risen because the Indian plate has moved very fast, has actually pressed against the Eurasian plate. So the Indian plate is subducting, going under the Eurasian plate, and the Himalayas are rising. So that place is heavily earthquake prone, very highly earthquake prone. That we know very well. And Nepal earthquake in 2015 have shown that again. But what we have built up in Delhi, far worse than this Gaziantep and other cities in Turkey. If anyone has moved in Delhi, and for people's information, Delhi itself, the city of Delhi, sits on top of three fault lines: the Sohna fault line, the Delhi Mathura fault line, and the Delhi Moradabad fault line. So these three are fault lines because the Himalayan fault zone, Himalayan thrust zone, is not far from Delhi. The pressure that the Indian plate is giving to the Eurasian plate, under that pressure, there are a lot of cracks that has happened. And these cracks, where there is a large crack where the plates move against each other, sections, these are fault lines. So Delhi sits on three fault lines. The satellite city of Gurgaon or Gurugram sits on roughly seven fault lines. So these areas are sitting time bombs, sitting earthquake time bombs. Because if anyone has seen Delhi's building, many of Delhi's buildings where one story, two-story structures were there, no reinforcement, and these have been made into four-story structures which have been expanded without any regulation, without any control. So if anything like even a 6.5 earthquake happens in Delhi, there will be massive devastation. There will be deaths in scale much larger than what had happened in Turkey today, Turkey and Syria today. So we are not only expressing sorrow, expressing our sympathy, expressing our condolences to the Turkey and Syrian areas and people there. We are also looking back to our own country. Can we have another of this? The same Delhi areas. We have more maps. Yes. So here you can see in Delhi, Delhi is the national capital territory. In Delhi, which are high risk, highest risk, which are high risk, and which are low risk or safer areas. So we know in the highest risk areas, there are many structures, many colonies which are built very shabbily. In the high risk zones, there are even more. Like if you look at this Janakpuri area, then this Rohini area, then Paschim Bihar area, Jahangirpuri, these are high risk areas. So even in high risk areas, we have very shabbily built colonies where lakhs of people live in shabbily built houses close together, packed very close together. So if some of these fault lines, if during earthquake in the Himalayan fault thrust zones, if these fault lines get big jolts, what will happen in Delhi, which is home to 2 crore people, and out of that something like 80 lakh people, estimated 80 lakh people live in shabby housing, which have no earthquake resistant, which are built on without any reinforcement of the buildings. These are called load bearing structures with single brick walls. So we really shudder to think what will happen. But will our government wake up with this warning of Turkey and Syria? We don't see any sign of that here, even at this point. The Delhi government or the central government, both are responsible for Delhi. The buildings, regulations, the central government does through DDA, which is under the central government. There is an elected government in the Delhi, which is Delhi state government. None of these governments are showing any kind of awareness. Even looking at Indian government sent a big team of National Disaster Response Force, some relief material, etc. to Turkey. It's good gesture. They got a lot of claps, lot of appreciation. But will the governments of India and Delhi show even one-tenth that alacrity, one-tenth that preparation that Delhi, Shimla, Guwahati, Srinagar, and many other cities in Delhi are really sitting earthquake time bombs? It's high time that we recognize this. It's high time that we wake up, because if something, and earthquakes for someone, earthquakes are still not predictable long back. We know that some scientists, we know, don't know the full details. We know that sometimes scientists predicted or said that within the next few days there is very high likelihood of a big earthquake striking the East Anatolian fault line zone. So, and within the few days this earthquake struck. That's very uncertain even now. Scientists, with certainty, with any degree of certainty, scientists cannot predict earthquakes with any degree of certainty or accuracy. But we know, if not today, it will hit. And these are the fault lines that you can see on your screen. Delhi is located near 3 active seismic fault lines, Sohna, Mathura, and Delhi-Moradabad fault lines, as I said. And Gurgaon sits on several fault lines. Delhi NCR in the Gurgaon is the riskiest area. And Gurugram is also again another area where a lot of buildings are coming up. Some, of course, are buildings which have been built along the lines of earthquake resistant guidelines. Many buildings have been built without that. Many private builders are building with a lot of laxity. So one shudders to think what will happen in Delhi NCR, which is India's capital and shining India or rising India's capital. If some big earthquake strikes here, and you can see here the map of Delhi and the regions where earthquake have struck earlier. So it's nothing unusual. Delhi and its region and this whole area will be struck by earthquakes. That we know for certain. When? No one knows. How big it will be? We don't know. but it will be struck by earthquakes, and one or two of this will be big earthquakes. Now, if we have to prepare any preparation on a city level scale or a region level scale, this is again a map of Delhi region and the fault lines. You can see multiple fault lines crisscrossing. On the top, it is the Himalayan thrust zones. On Delhi region, you can see the blue, uh, pink, and the lines of the fault lines crisscrossing. So we know this area is highly earthquake prone. We know cities like Shimla. We can go back to Shimla's building pictures once more, so that
Yeah.
people can understand this is the one, the kind of disaster that is waiting to happen. And these are buildings you can see very clearly. And I have been to Shimla many times. Shimla on a mountain slope, on a highly earthquake prone zone, in a highly earthquake prone zone, on a mountain slope which can slip anytime, it is not flat ground. We have built 6 stories, 7 stories buildings with thin concrete pillars. So if a big earthquake strikes here, which will strike here someday or the other, we shudder to think what will happen. So it's high time we will end by saying this. We are extremely sorry that this huge earthquakes and the tragedy happened in Turkey and Syria. But this is also a wake up call, an alarm call that look within our own country, look at the big cities, look at the population centers, superimpose them on the known map of earthquake hazard zones of India. We have known that areas, 5 big cities in India, the highest risk earthquake prone zone. Out of that, Delhi, Guwahati, and Srinagar are the most earthquake prone zones, and Delhi, Guwahati are extremely densely populated with very shabby buildings. So let us wake up, let us take the warning from the Syria Turkey earthquake, the tragedy that happened, and let us push our governments, if the governments still are sensitive to listening, that start preparing, start building proper, start looking at what can happen, and start preparing for avoiding a big tragedy if such an earthquake strikes, which will strike in 1 year or 10 year or 20 year. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So this is what the earthquake, Turkey and Syria. Now we have given you clear idea about what is going to happen in India, the northeastern region, starting from Shimla to Jammu and Kashmir and Delhi also. We have shown you everything. Now, Prime Minister Modi, his government, and all the political parties, and all those babus who have so much of interest, now they have to come together to secure the lives. How can they do that? Simply avoid building bad buildings in those sensitive areas, or no buildings for that matter when you got such a huge place, or else, as rightly pointed out by Soumya Dattaji, the buildings which will cater to that sensitive area, the designs or whatever it is. But a huge tragedy which has struck Turkey and Syria, our heart goes with those people who lost their lives and the families on the roads. Our sympathies to them. And who is responsible? Are the governments responsible or not? That is why we are trying to put it across. Governments, when we elect representatives, if they do not have knowledge and if they try to administer the development, which is very, 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 very risky, and it's going to endanger lives, destroy your hard earned money and all the properties, what is that you are going to do? That is a big question. So, if the governments are responsible or the earthquake itself is responsible, we leave it to the people, the concerned citizens, honorable citizens, to understand that earthquake may happen. It may be a routine or natural thing to happen. Why it happens and all, because that why climate crisis, why earthquakes happen. We will come back to Soumya Dattaji once he comes back from Morocco. Both the things we will do it, but till that time, when you have all the information that these are the sensitive areas, sensitive seismic areas, earthquake prone areas, why should you build buildings and stay there? That is the big question. Shimla, Srinagar, we have shown you Delhi, those big cities, including Guwahati, are not safe. What is the government going to do now? That is a big question. So that is why we are trying to sensitize the citizens so that they rescue their lives. They will put pressure on the governments to act, at least to start debating, discussing, so that a solution can be found before a tragedy like what has happened in Syria and Turkey. So take care. Do support DRTSPR channel, Citizen DRTSPR channel, and Environment People DRTSPR channel. This will go live again on Environment People DRTSPR channel on Friday at 8 p.m. too. Thank you very much, sir. Take care. Once
Thank
again,
you, Namaskar.
my viewers will be waiting for you to give the reasons why climate crisis, why these earthquakes will happen. That also
Sure,
do it in
come back.
series. Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you. Namaskar.
Sukha Nidra, Shubharatri. Bye from DRTSPR channels. Do support, subscribe, and share DRTSPR channels in larger public interest.